And then once you decide, you have to do it right. So many people take partnerships. Yeah, look at that.
Just tell me to go to next slide.
Okay, next slide.
Okay. Oh, I can't. No, there we go.
Okay, so we're going to go through 4 things, and I think it's half an hour, right, Josh? So I'm going to try to do this in 10 minutes. Okay, so we're going to
ask Q&A with Q&A.
Yeah, exactly. So why partner, typical types of partners, and how to partner. So let's go to the next slide. We'll do some questions. The why partners, or why partner, actually. So partnerships can be fundamental to a company's growth strategy. But you really, as Josh said, you really got to think about why you're going to invest time, money, and resources, which are usually very scarce in an early stage startup. So you really need to think through why you're going to do this. But some quick examples that might be obvious, might not be obvious, why companies partner. Well, the first one most people think of is increased sales. However, there's others, like you can partner with people to secure capabilities and resources that you don't have at a lower level investment. So you can partner with a firm that does stuff that you need doing without you having to hire people to do it. You also can partner to gain access to new industries, geographies, and even specific customers. Again, without making the investment that you would need to make to go to a new country or move from your core industry to a second industry. You can also partner make your product more valuable. So by combining technologies or capabilities, a partnerships can make your product more valuable to the end customer. You also can partner to make it easier to buy your product. So sometimes it's just, there's concepts where they're like master services agreements with financial institutions. If you partner with somebody who already has an MSA with a bank, that saves you literally up to years in trying to get an MSA in place for yourself, by yourself. You can also partner for just sheer credibility. You get the right partner in the right industry, and it means that whatever you're bringing to market is credible. And, one that often gets forgot is just creating partnerships, getting conversations going with people who might eventually look at you as, look at acquiring you. So building a partnership often is just laying the foundation to get closer to somebody who might be an acquirer. Next slide. So what's types of partners? And I'm going to kind of, look at this from a technology perspective or a software perspective. Well, actually technology in general. So what's typical are application vendors, or what they used to be called independent software vendors, ISVs. These are the people who will potentially build on your, as an extension or on top of the technology that you have. So either, let's say you're doing hardware, somebody might be building on top of your hardware, or you have a platform, an operating system, something like that. They might build on top of what you have. And, typical arrangements there are revenue share type arrangements. If they, you give them a bunch of services, you might give them some certification programs, you might give them, just make it easy for them to do what they're trying to do on your platform. And then often when they sell something, you share some revenue. The next one is a system integrator, and system integrators are usually consultants. So you've got the big ones, Accenture, those types, Wipro, and you've got just literally millions of small boutique shops that you can partner with. And here's a group of people that can give you professional services capabilities. They can give you software development capabilities that in areas that you don't want to play in. And by partnering with these people, they actually get your product out there faster. They make it more interesting and more valuable to the end customer. Then you've got the value-added resellers. These are people who will combine your technology with something else. You think about people who put together ATM networks and stuff like that. They're doing everything from the hardware to the software and the network, and they're putting it all together to deliver it to a financial institution, for example. Then you got the plain distributors. These are people who are like Tech Data, Ingram Micro, Arrow, Avnet. These are all people who will put you on their line card and they will sell your stuff. Maybe if their salespeople are interested in selling it. And then you've got technology and engineering partnerships. So this is the type of thing that can start to get interesting for the long term. You may work with Intel to make your stuff work better on a specific one of their chips, or you may work with a hardware vendor to optimize for their storage system or their hardware somehow. These are longer term, take more investment of time and resources. But here's where I'm thinking that some of you might be able to look at these types of partnerships as a potential exit strategy in the long term. Another one that people don't think about much is the partnership with open source communities, or communities in general, but I'm thinking open source here from a software perspective. Really working with a community closely, if that's of benefit to you, can be an incredibly valuable partnership. And it's, it's not just from revenue generation, it's from speed to market, it's from hiring. It's like, there's a lot of different perspectives that you can look at partnering with open source communities or communities in general to add value to your business. So the next slide. So how to partner. I'm actually doing a consulting project for a fintech company in New York, all around their channel development and partnership strategy. And, digging in deep over the last month or so, there hasn't been a lot of innovation out there. And, but the problem is when people get into this, that it's like what Josh said, they don't really strategically think about why they're doing it. So there's a lot of common mistakes that happen. And unfortunately, people don't do their homework and they don't actually know what the best practices and the common mistakes are. And I'm actually seeing that right now. I just listed a bunch of common mistakes. Back in the late 90s, when the first internet boom happened, everybody was partnered with everybody just to get their logo onto their website. And it became ridiculous. Nothing of value was ever done, but there's a lot of logo chasing going on. Like Josh said, getting distracted. If you're even mildly successful, there'll be a ton of inbound, and you gotta be careful that you don't get distracted by these inbound shiny things. When people are looking at this, they also don't understand the ROI. Fundamentally, you need to understand the return on your investment because, again, your resources are scarce. Another common mistake is trying to turn partnerships unnaturally into some way to extract revenue. If you're dealing with ISVs and you're asking for them to build on your platform, but then you're asking for a lot of money up front, that's makes everything about the relationship out of balance, and it also sends the wrong kind of signals that you're desperate for this money. Another common mistake is misplaced hubris. When you're dealing with potential partners, you have to understand that you are typically the little person, right? You're not going to get to the top of the line card as a startup. They literally are getting hundreds of thousands of inquiries on partnering a year. So just because you think you're great, to make it to the top of a line card for a salesperson in a big organization is a very difficult thing to do, and it's not just going to happen because you think you're great. Another common mistake is forgetting about the fact that a partnership is a partnership. It should be mutually beneficial, right? So what will the other side get out of this partnership? Don't just think about what you're going to get out of it, but what can you deliver to the other side to get them excited and to move you up on their line card. Another common mistake is to actually think about the person you're talking to, like the individual. How do they get paid? How do they get bonused? What drives that person in that big company you're trying to partner with? What makes them look good? What makes them make money? What makes them get a promotion? That's a really important thing. Like, you may see from a big picture why Google wants to partner with you, but what the person on the other side who you need to help you, what drives them? Poor planning around partnerships. It's, too many partner department, like channel management groups in companies, you know, they love having conversations, and there's not a really specific plan around you know, developing partnerships and channel management. And then finally, this takes a long time. You know, making partners successful or making partnerships successful takes time, as Josh mentioned. And you know, you got to be committed to this. You can't expect to turn a partnership into a successful return on investment driving relationship without making the investment of time and staying committed to it. Next slide, please. Oh, outside the box. So let's just talk about how to do it right. Really kind of, you know, fundamental stuff. And again, I would encourage anybody that's interested in learning more, just start to read and start to look at some of the, you know, more successful companies' partnership strategies with the type of targets that you're looking at, because there's, you know, tons of best practices out there. And like I said, it's not that much innovation. It's just, you know, much more clarity around what people offer to their partners and what the partners can expect in return. So I encourage people to go look at Microsoft, look at Google, look at, you know, these companies have great certification programs, great partnership programs, like just to have you know, dig in. So, you know, the things that you have to do is that you have to start with a goal. You know, don't take the inbound and make it a priority unless you really understand that this fits within the goals of your startup, and have a good idea of, if you're going to invest time, what success looks like. Then create a detailed plan. You know, like, no, it's so many companies, they don't even have a profile. Like, everybody has customer profiles for their target customers, but nobody has partner profiles. It's really unique situation, but you know, you got to define what type of person or what type of company you're going after. And then, you know, just simple things like, what are your timelines, and, you know, how do you know that you're moving towards success? You know, what are the key milestones? Make sure that once you have, you know, your targets defined, make sure you have mutually beneficial value propositions developed for each of your targets. So understand the benefit for you, but also understand the benefit for them. Resource appropriately. Now, I you know, in a small startup where there's 1 or 2 or 5 people, you know, everybody does everything, and this is maybe a little bit later stage than that. But you know, I see 100-person companies that the CEO is still on the contract as the key stakeholder driving the partnership, and that's not going to work. You need to, once you start to mature your channel management, your partnership management capabilities, you need to resource them properly. It is biz dev. It's a biz dev department. Like, you need to have people who are, you know, they're not salespeople. They're never salespeople. Salespeople are typically coin operated. They want to go from one deal to the next. This requires patience. This requires planning. This requires project management. It requires resource corralling internally. Like, you need a different type of person to manage channel and manage partners than sales. One of the other best practices is turn things into programs. If you know you need to train an outside software vendor, an independent software vendor, then turn it into a program, a certification program that's repeatable, right? Maybe even charge money for it if your certifications are valuable enough. But you know, you want to try to make things programmatic instead of having all kinds of one-offs with different types of partners. Next thing, I mentioned it earlier, but you got to stay committed, because this takes time, right? So, and people get fired, they quit their jobs, they move to another company. Because it takes time, the variables increase. So you need to be committed, and you need to check your milestones, so you know when it's time to, you know, the proper time to leave is. Be creative. One of the things that I find with partnerships, that people don't think creatively enough about them. You know, when you start thinking about the other side, the value to the other side, you know, think big, like think really big. You know, what could this mean over the medium to longer term? There's reasons why companies partner, like big companies will partner everything from it just looks good from a marketing standpoint to, you know, this separates them in that vertical in their business from their competition, right? So think big without being, you know, letting your ego get in the way. You know, just paint a really interesting picture from the, maybe even something they would have never thought of. And don't be scared to start the conversation, right? You can always, if you're disciplined, you can always stop the conversation, but don't think anybody's too big to talk to. Don't think that anybody's too important to talk to. If you think you can add value to a potential partner, start the conversation. You don't know what's on their roadmap. You don't know what's on their plans. You don't know who they're going to buy next or who they're partnering with next. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons to start the conversation. And that's, I think, all I've got on the slides. So let's open it up to questions.
Yeah, I can jump in. I'd like to get clear what we're talking about with partnerships. I could tell by your slides. I couldn't tell from your slides. There are some partners that'll help you sell. There are other partners who'll help you develop the technology. Do your slides and your
Josh, can you pull
what you're
up the
saying
Y
apply
partner?
to both? Pardon what?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Y part.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, one like there are partners who will help you sell or will sell for you. There are partners who will give you capabilities that you don't have. Professional services is a perfect example, or support services, or post-sale support services. And then they will make your product more valuable. You know, that could be through extending your product, building on your product, making your product more performant. Like there's all kinds of different ways that they can make your product more valuable. Make your product easier to buy, like, you know, partner with a cloud vendor so that you can, or like somebody like Salesforce, so somebody can buy things through their platform. So there's many reasons to partner, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
No problem.
I've got one for you.
Okay.
When working with a technical or manufacturing partner, how do you strike a balance between being forthright and communicating the technical details that you're working with and protecting your own intellectual property and sort of the specifics of what you're working on?
Yeah, I'm open. In an early stage startup, I'm incredibly open, right? Like like if you're getting into, you're working with a manufacturer and you tell them about your approach and stuff, typically that's not going to hurt you. There's very few times that you're going to get somebody to steal your idea. But you know, there's no reason why you can't go a few levels and then say, let's do an NDA, let's do a confidentiality agreement, and ask for it. Okay. So it is a bit of an art, right? You have to recognize whether or not there's any incentive to the manufacturer that you want to partner with to do it themselves. By the way, you know, if they know you exist and they, you know, even thought about this, they're going to do and they have that kind of, they have that motivation to do it themselves, they will, right? So like you're really taking a chance, but I think the risks are very low. I think Josh mentioned that in a previous session. Like just tell them what you're doing. Before you send the schematics over though, there's no reason not to ask for confidentiality and or NDA, whatever you want to use.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, don't be scared. Like, don't be scared that people are busy, right? To just all of a sudden stand something up to do what you're doing is typically not how companies operate. They'll buy you first if you've actually got something, you know, typically. You agree with that, Josh?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Hard to get a company to do anything. So
yeah, exactly. Like you just, you know what it's like for a phone company or a big manufacturer to develop something new, right? Like it takes them forever. They're slow as hell. They're not incentivized to do that, right? Their bonuses aren't, they're typically not bonused on it. So don't be too scared to go a little farther than feels comfortable.
Thank you. That's really valuable.
No problem. Anybody else with partnerships? I think it's, did somebody else have a question? Sorry. No. Okay. I would like to say though, one thing just in support of partnerships, because Josh, said it's not, it's not as important early on. I agree. You have to have something before you have to have something compelling, something valuable to the other side before you start wasting your time thinking a lot about this. But once you do have something valuable, one of the companies that, I started with Sage, one of the founders of DreamHost, we got bought for a lot of money, and it wasn't because of our revenue. It was because we partnered with a cloud open source community in a way that was incredibly important to that community. That community was also being pushed by some very big manufacturers, hardware vendors, software vendors. And, we started to partner with them, and it was a storage system. And we were getting our storage system put on hardware and packaged with, storage hardware from everybody from Samsung to SanDisk. So, I would say that in that case, our partnerships were the main reason why we were acquired by Red Hat. So,
Hey,
like,
Bryan,
I don't want, sorry.
Would I be able to ask about that? Would you be able to provide a second example of how specifically an online open source community would be able to help a startup? Because I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around that idea.
Yeah, it only helps you if you're you're involved or you're using the software. It's somehow important to you. So if you're building, something on Chromium, for example, or you're building something on, React or something, you might want to get involved in that community, get exposure in that community, working with that community. You find talent that way. That's the first thing. If you're, if you start contributing to these communities, because so few people actually make valuable contributions back. A lot of people use it. They don't contribute back. You get noticed very quickly. You start making friends. You start, because you're contributing. You look like a good actor, and you then start building relationships and networks. And then you realize, wait a minute, Microsoft is now a huge contributor to Chromium. It's not just Google, right? So, like you started expanding your network for all good reasons, because you're a good, you're a good citizen in those communities, right? So. And if you think, say, Microsoft or Google will ever be a potential acquirer, that's the door you walk through. It's an easy door to walk through to start getting conversations going about deeper and deeper relationships.